we're back.
Hello everybody, this is Brandon, and on today's episode I'd like to talk to you about Tutti Frutti. No, not that Tutti Frutti, although it does play a role in today's episode. No, I'm talking, of course, about Tutti Frutti, the original rock and roll song by Richard Wayne Penniman, better known to the world as Little Richard. The song that started it all, and a song that is turning 65 years old this year. Now, Little Richard did not invent rock and roll, though he's often cited as being the architect of rock and roll. In fact, nobody really knows who invented rock and roll because there are so many different people who contributed to the creation of the genre, including Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Scott Joplin, Ike Turner, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley. Just kidding, we all know Elvis Presley had absolutely nothing to do with the invention of rock and roll. But like I said, nobody really knows who invented it, but much like Jesus Christ, I'm pretty sure he was probably a black man. Anyways, by 1955, Little Richard had already recorded a handful of singles for a couple different record labels, and none of them really did all that well. So by this time, he was kind of feeling some pressure to come up with a hit. So during the waning hours of the last day of a recording session with Specialty Records, he was really feeling that pressure. And things were not going well during this session, so everyone decided to take a break. So he and the band and the producers decided to go over to a local bar to kind of regroup. And at the bar, there was a piano. And Little Richard, of course, being Little Richard, he goes up to the piano and starts playing. Before long, he's singing a song. And it's a song that the record producers recognize immediately as a hit. Unfortunately, they also recognized there was absolutely no way that they were going to be able to release the song the way that, with the words that Little Richard was singing. No one knows exactly what he was singing that day, but one band member that was there remembers them going as something like this. Tutti Frutti, good booty, if it's tight, it's all right, and if it's greasy, it makes it easy. So it's kind of a jubilant ode to homosexuality and anal sex, perhaps, making the song more this and less this. So the producers knew they would not be able to release it that way, so they called up a local songwriter. Her name was Dorothy Labostri, and they knew her because she was a struggling songwriter who was always trying to push her songs onto anybody that would listen. Unfortunately for her, she never had any takers, so they knew she'd be available. So they call her up, and of course, she comes down to the studio. They play her the song, and she sits down and more or less on the spot writes out the clean version of Tutti Frutti. Now, she claimed that her inspiration was, in fact, the ice cream flavor, her favorite flavor. She would also claim, however, that Little Richard had nothing to do with the writing of the words of Tutti Frutti, that he never wrote a single word, that she was the only writer of Tutti Frutti. Conversely, of course, Little Richard would claim the same thing, that he was the person who wrote Tutti Frutti. And yet there's others who claim that the song was already existed in one form or another, kind of just as a loose collection of raunchy couplets put to music that musicians would kind of play to each other backstage just to amuse themselves and amuse each other. It was never intended for an audience or to be recorded. Kind of like the Aristocrats joke for comedians. It never had any real set lyrics. It was whatever you wanted it to be, or words. It was whatever you wanted it to be, as long as it was filthy, dirty, raunchy, just the dirtier the better. And again, never meant to be told in front of an audience. It was just to amuse themselves. Anyways, in the end, both Little Richard and Dorothy would be credited as co-authors of the song, and rightfully so. And their names would appear together on the record label for as long as there's records, I suppose. Anyways, the song's recorded in September of 1955, and it was released in October of 1955. And as predicted, it did become a hit. It made it up to number 21 on the charts during its initial release. But more importantly, it laid the foundation for all rock and roll songs that would come after it. It was loud, it was raw, it was provocative, it was dangerous. At least, some people found it really dangerous as well, particularly white parents and authorities. who really feared this new thing called rock and roll. It's not so much that they feared the music itself or that it would even lead to juvenile delinquency or anything like that. That would come later. But what they really feared at that time was that rock and roll would lead to the intermingling of the races. You gotta have to remember that when rock and roll was born, it was born into a world, or a country anyways, that still had Jim Crow segregation laws on the books, laws that would be heavily enforced for about another 10 years, up until about 1965. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up another event that happened 65 years ago. In fact, it happened just a few weeks before the recording of Tutti Frutti, and that is the lynching and mutilation of Emmett Till, who we all know was a 14-year-old kid from Chicago that was visiting family down in Mississippi when he was accused of catcalling and groping a white woman at a grocery store. The lady would later admit to lying and making up the whole story. By then, of course, it was way too late. But if that seems like a little bit of a reach for some people, the intermingling of the races was very scary and was very dangerous for a lot of people, not just the white parents, but for the musicians themselves, who recognized that their audiences were becoming more and more white. They're being filled with more white kids, and the audiences had to be segregated. The white kids on the floor and the black kids up in the balcony up and back. And it was around this time, during Little Richard's rise in popularity, that he started wearing pancake makeup. Well, actually, he'd been wearing pancake makeup pretty much from day one. But it was during this time that he really upped the game, upped the ante. He started dressing even more flamboyantly. His hair got even wilder, wearing more makeup. The stage show got more campy and more flamboyant, just to let everybody know in the audience, at least the white males in the audience, that he wasn't after their women. He wasn't chasing after them. He was safe. Everything's cool. So without coming out and actually openly declaring on stage that he was a gay man, with the wink and a nod, he was letting them know in his own way that it was safe. You don't have to worry about me. Don't want to be made an example of. And that he was safe. And he always, out of self-preservation, he said he started wearing more pancake makeup just to get by this period. And he never looked back. He just got more and more flamboyant as time went on. But it wasn't long that before the record executives and producers recognized the earning potential of rock and roll, if only they can sell to a wider audience, wider audience. So it wasn't long before people like Elvis and Pat Boone and Jerry Lee Lewis and whoever else started recording some of these original rock and roll songs and making them their own, making big hits out of them. In fact, it was only about 3 months after the original recording of Tutti Frutti that Pat Boone recorded his very vanilla, very watered-down version of Tutti Frutti. It was a song that he admitted he never liked. He didn't understand the song. He didn't want to record the song, but his managers pressured him to do it because they thought it would be a hit. And in fact, it was. That went on to do even better than the original, in fact. And this was years before decades before Pat Boone came out with another record of covers, and that was In a Metal Mood, where he covered heavy metal, hard rock songs of the day like Enter Sandman and Paradise City. Anyways, I'm telling you all this because on this week's episode of the Blue On Radio podcast, episode number 118, our featured artist is Little Richard. This is long overdue. Little Richard did pass away this year in May 2020. And so I'm a little late, but I did want to shine a spotlight on a guy who was responsible for, if not creating it all, he was definitely there from the very beginning. Anyways, I want to thank you for watching. This is Brandon saying go in peace. Have a good night.